Greetings, travelers of the void. You have entered the domain of the Voidborne Terrors. I am going to read you a sermon, the last one its author ever gave. She was a confessor of the Ecclesia, a preacher, a keeper of the imperial faith, a woman who spent 60 years teaching the people of a shrine world to love the emperor and to hate his enemies and to long above all things for the day the emperor's angels would descend from the sky in shining armor to deliver them. She got her wish. The angels came. And the sermon you are about to hear is what she preached afterward. Once, to a congregation that reported her to the authorities before she had finished, because what she said could not be permitted to be said. And she was taken, and she was tried, and she was executed as a heretic for the crime of describing, accurately, the thing that had saved her world. She built the whole sermon around a single question, and she asked it at the beginning, and she asked it at the end, and she never once answered it, because she could not, because no one can. And I am going to ask it to you now, at the start, so that you carry it the whole way down. When salvation looks like damnation, and sounds like damnation, and kills like damnation, when the thing that comes to save you is indistinguishable in the moment of your saving from the thing it came to save you from, who then is actually saving humanity. Hold that. She held it for the rest of her short life. Listen close, traveler, and notice, as she does, the exact moment the shining armor stops looking like an angel's and starts looking like something else. And ask yourself whether the armor changed, or whether you have only, finally, been allowed to see it clearly. Chapter 1. The Illusion. Brothers and sisters in the Emperor's light, beloved, be seated. I have one more sermon in me, and it is not the one you came to hear. And when I am done, some of you will do what you must do, and I forgive you for it in advance, because I taught you to do it. And a teacher does not blame the pupil for learning the lesson too well. That is the whole of my sermon, in fact, if you want it early and want to leave. That we can be taught a lesson so well that learning it perfectly makes us monsters. But you will want the rest. Everyone always wants the rest. So, let me begin where I have begun 10,000 sermons. Let me begin in glory. My name, for those who hear this and did not know me, for the record I am no longer permitted to be part of my name, is Iona Vale. And I was a confessor of the Adeptus Ministorum on the shrine world of Palentine for 60 years. And for most of those 60 years, I was the happiest servant of the Emperor you could ever have hoped to meet. You must understand what a shrine world is, and what it is to be raised on one, before you can understand what was done to mine, and what I learned from the doing. Palentine was holy. That was not a boast. It was the planet's function, its tithe, its reason for the Imperium's attention. Some worlds make weapons, and some make soldiers, and some make grain. Palentine made faith. The whole planet was a cathedral hive cities, built around basilicas, built around older basilicas, a crust of continuous worship a mile deep in places, and the 4 billion souls of Palentine spent their lives in the service of the imperial creed. As pilgrims, as choristers, as candle makers and relic keepers and preachers, as the vast devout population of a world whose only export was the love of the God Emperor of mankind. I was born into it. I could recite the catechism before I could walk, and I did not chafe against it, the way the stories say the clever ones do. I loved it, purely, with my whole heart, because the faith of Palentine was a beautiful thing, warm and total and certain, and it filled a life the way water fills a cup. And I have never, before or since, been so happy as I was in the years when I believed. I say when I believed, and I must be careful with those words, because they are not quite true, and the way they are not quite true is the whole tragedy. I believe still. That is the thing I cannot make the Ordo understand, the thing that makes my heresy so much worse than simple apostasy. I did not lose my faith on Palentine. I love the Emperor now, tonight, as the Arbites gather at my door, as purely as I loved him at 6 years old, reciting the catechism in the creche. What I lost was not faith. What I lost was the belief that faith is safe, that loving the Emperor and hating his enemies with all one's heart could only ever produce good, that the intensity of devotion was itself a kind of protection, that a person could not go wrong by believing harder. I had built 60 years on the assumption that faith was a shelter, that the more of it you had, the safer you were. And Palentine taught me that faith is not a shelter, it is a fire warming at the hearth, devastating out of it, and identical in substance, whether it is warming or devastating, and growing, always hotter with feeding, and that a soul that feeds its faith without limit does not become safe. It becomes a furnace, and a furnace does not care what it burns. I still tend my small fire, I still love its warmth, but I have seen what the same fire becomes when it is fed without limit by beings strong enough to feed it forever, and I can no longer pretend that my little hearth flame and the Templar's inferno are different fires. They are the same fire. Mine is only smaller, and I am only weaker, and that is the only reason my faith has not yet burned a child. Give me the Templar's strength, and the Templar's license, and 10,000 years, and I would be Wolfhard. Anyone would. That is what faith is, underneath the hymns. That is what I preached, and loved, and still love, and it is a fire, and I am so afraid of it now, and I tend it anyway because the dark is worse, and there we are again, at the only two things I am sure of, and they do not fit together, and they never will. And the center of that faith, the burning center, the thing that every sermon circled back to, the thing that made the children's eyes shine, was the angels, the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, the Emperor's own sons, transhuman and glorious, forged from his gene craft into the finest warriors the galaxy has ever known, sent out across the stars to defend mankind from the horrors of the dark. Every hive child on Palentine had a picture of one above their bed, golden, haloed, radiant, a sword in one hand, and the aquila on their breast, descending from heaven in fire to smite the unclean. We taught them as saints made flesh. We taught them as the answer to every prayer. When a Palentine child was afraid of the dark, we told them, the angels are watching, the angels are coming. However bad it gets, however deep the shadow, one day the sky will open and the Emperor's angels will descend and they will save you, because that is what they are for, because they love you as the Emperor loves you, and their love is a sword. And I preach the Black Templars most gloriously of all, so let me give you that too. The illusion at its fullest, the way I preached it, so that you feel what 4 billion faithful felt and understand what was taken from us. I would tell the children of the vows. The Black Templars, I told them, are not merely warriors. They are knights, crusader knights, and before every battle each one speaks a vow to the Emperor, an oath sworn on his own blood, and binds his very weapon to his arm with a chain of iron, so that he may never, in life, let it fall. Imagine it, children. A knight so devoted that he chains his sword to his own flesh, so that even in death, his grip on the Emperor's justice cannot be broken. I would tell them of the banners the Black Templars carry into battle, the accumulated honors of 10,000 years, great banners hung with the seals and relics of 100 centuries of crusade, so that when they fight, the whole weight of imperial history fights beside them, I would tell them of the shining black armor trimmed in silver and bone, of the great crosses, of the purity seals fluttering like the prayers of saints. I would tell them of the eternal crusade itself that these knights had been fighting, unbroken, for the entire age of the Imperium, that no Black Templar had known a day of peace in 10,000 years, that they had given up home and rest and everything a soul might want in order to wage endless holy war on the Emperor's enemies. And I would say, is that not the purest love, children? To give up everything, forever, for the God who made you? To want nothing but to fight and die in his name? And the children's eyes would shine, and I would feel the warmth of a faith well kept spreading through the congregation. And I believed it, all of it, and it was all true, and every glorious word of it is also, I now know, a precise description of damnation. And the children whose eyes shone at the chained sword and the endless war and the wanting nothing but to kill and die. For God were being taught to find the creed of the blood God beautiful by me from this pulpit, and they did find it beautiful. Because it is beautiful, that is the horror. It is genuinely and truly beautiful, and so is the fire that consumes a world. I preached that for 60 years. I preached it beautifully. I was good at it. I could make a congregation of 10,000 weep with longing for the day the angels would come, and I meant every word, and I want you to hold on to the fact that I meant it. Because the horror of this sermon is not that I was lying. I was not lying. Everything I preached about the Emperor's angels was true. That is the trap. That is the whole trap. It was all true, and it was all glorious, and it was all real. And when the day finally came, and the sky finally opened, and the angels finally descended in fire to save Palentine, every single thing I had promised came to pass. Exactly, gloriously, precisely as I had preached it. And it was the worst thing that has ever happened, and I helped it happen, with 60 years of beautiful true sermons, and that is why I am giving this last one. Let me tell you how Palentine fell, because it fell before it was saved, and the falling matters. It came from within, the way it almost always does on a shrine world, because a shrine world is a world of pure faith, and pure faith is a thing that can be turned. There was a cult. There is always a cult. In a population of 4 billion true believers, there will always be a few thousand whose faith, pressed hard enough by suffering or doubt, or the whispering of the dark, curdles into its opposite. And the opposite of the love of a god is not the absence of a god. It is the love of a different one. The cult on Palentine worshipped the blood god. I will not speak his name. I am still enough of a confessor to refuse his name, but you know the one I mean, the god of rage and slaughter and the skull throne, the god whose entire creed is that the only true worship is killing, that blood spilled in his name is prayer, that the highest devotion is a battlefield, and the finest cathedral is a mound of the slain. That god. His cult had grown in the under-basilicas of Palentine like rot under a floorboard, for years, unseen. And when it rose all at once, in a single night of blades. And it turned the most faithful world in the subsector into a slaughterhouse, because a population trained its whole life to absolute devotion makes, when it is turned, the most absolute and devoted monsters imaginable. The blood cult of Palentine did not fight the Imperium's way. It butchered. It raised towers of skulls in the cathedral squares. It opened with enough blood the doors that blood opens, and the demons of the blood god came through red and roaring and axe-handed. The living rage of a god made flesh, and Palentine, my beautiful holy Palentine, became a world screaming in the dark, praying, as I had taught it to pray for the angels to come. I have to give you those 3 days before the angels came, because they are the reason no one on Palentine can be a simple pacifist about what came after, and because they are the case for the monsters that I must make honestly if my case against them is to mean anything. The blood cult held nothing back. When it rose, it did not seek power or territory or any goal a sane mind could bargain with. It sought only slaughter, because slaughter is the whole of its god's desire. I saw things in those 3 days that I will not describe, because describing them serves the blood god, who wants his works remembered. But I will tell you that the skull towers in the cathedral squares were real, that they were built while their makers sang, that the singing was joyful, and that the daemons, when they came through, were worse. Red things of living rage that killed for the ecstasy of it, and could not be reasoned with, or frightened, or stopped by anything the people of Palentine possessed. Our home guard died in their thousands and bought nothing. Our faith bought nothing. The cultists had been faithful once too, and their faith had only made them more terrible when it turned. In 3 days, a quarter of sanctuary, Primus was skulls, and there was no version of those days in which Palentine saved itself. We had candle makers and choristers and laze guns against the living wrath of a god, and we were going to die, all 4 billion of us, into the blood god's cup, slowly, singing, and I knew it, kneeling in the dark. I knew we were lost. So when I make my terrible case against the angels, hold this beside it, as I have had to. We were genuinely lost, and they genuinely saved us. And the enemy they saved us from was genuinely worse, not arguably worse, plainly and enormously worse. A horror with no redeeming purpose at all. Any account of Palentine that pretends the Templars descended on a peaceful world and ruined it is a lie as large as the propaganda I preached for 60 years. The blood cult would have taken everything. The Templars took most of it and left 1 billion alive. That is not nothing. It is the opposite of nothing. And it is precisely because the salvation was real, because the alternative was genuinely worse, that the horror of the salvation is unbearable, because you cannot even wish it away, cannot say better. They had never come, because if they had never come, there would be no one left on Palentine to hold an opinion at all. Keep the 3 days. I keep them. They are the reason my heresy is not a comfort, and I prayed too. I gathered my congregation, those I could reach, a few thousand terrified faithful, into the great basilica of St. Aurelia at the heart of Sanctuary Primus. And we barred the doors against the blood and the roaring, and we prayed, and I led the prayers, and I told them what I had told them their whole lives. Hold on. The angels are coming. However deep the shadow, the sky will open, and the Emperor's angels will descend, and they will save us. And I believed it even then, even with the skull towers rising in the square outside. I believed it with my whole 60-year heart. And on the 3rd day, the sky opened. I will give you that moment, because it was the most glorious moment of my life, and because you need to have felt the glory to understand the horror, because they are the same moment, seen twice. The drop pods came down like falling stars, burning, screaming down through the smoke of a dying world, and they struck the cathedral square among the skull towers with the force of artillery, and out of them came the angels, and they were everything I had ever preached. Armored giants, 8 feet of ceramite, and their armor was black as a starless night, black trimmed in bone white and silver, and on every shoulder a great cross, and on every breast the sigils of 100 oaths, and they came out of the drop pods already killing, already glorious, and they fell upon the blood cultists and the demons in the square with a fury that stopped my heart with joy. banners unfurled, real banners, hung with the purity seals and battle honors of 10,000 years of war. And they cried out, they had a battle cry, and it rolled across the square and through the barred doors of the basilica and into the hearts of every terrified soul inside. And I wept to hear it. I fell to my knees and wept with the purest joy I have ever felt, because it was the answer to 60 years of prayer. And the cry was, no pity, no remorse, no fear. I want you to feel that first hour as I felt it, without the knowledge that came after, because the knowledge that came after is a poison that makes it impossible to feel the glory clean, and you should feel it clean once, the way I did, the way 4 billion of us did, so that you understand it was not stupidity that made us love them. It was that they were genuinely glorious. I have to insist on this against my own bitterness. The arrival of the Black Templars on Palentine was the single most magnificent thing I have witnessed in 80 years of life. The drop pods coming down like the wrath of heaven made manifest. The black giants striding out of the fire into the very worst of the enemy without a heartbeat's hesitation. Fearless, unstoppable, glorious. The banners. The cry. For 60 years I had promised to frighten people that the sky would open and salvation would descend, and I had half wondered, in my most private and shameful moments, whether it was only a story, and then the sky opened and salvation descended, exactly as promised, and it was real, and it was more magnificent than any sermon I had ever managed, and in that first hour I was not a fool for weeping with joy. I was a woman whose life's faith had just been vindicated before her eyes. Anyone would have wept. You would have wept. Hold on to that, because the whole horror of this sermon depends on you understanding that the people who loved the Black Templars were not deceived by an ugly thing dressed up pretty. They were shown a genuinely glorious thing, and they loved it for genuinely good reasons, and the glorious thing was the horror, and there was never any gap between the two for a wiser person to have seen. That is what makes it a contradiction, and not merely a deception. A deception can be seen through. There was nothing here to see through. It was all exactly as glorious as it looked, and it was damnation. And both were true in the same object at the same time. And that is the thing no faith prepares you for, because faith is built to help you tell the light from the dark, and it has no answer at all for a light that is also the dark. The Black Templars had come to Palentine. Oh, we knew them. Every confessor knew the Black Templars, the most devout of all the Emperor's angels. The Crusaders, the ones who had never stopped fighting since the heresy 10,000 years ago, who had no homeworld because their home was the eternal crusade itself, an unbroken war that had raged across the galaxy for 100 centuries and would rage until the last enemy of the Emperor was dead. They were the zealots, the purest, the ones whose faith was so absolute that they were said to hate the witch and the mutant and the unclean with a holiness that burned. Of all the angels I had ever preached, the Black Templars were the ones I held up highest. Because their faith was the closest to ours, they were warrior preachers, crusader monks, and a shrine world loves nothing so much as a warrior who loves the Emperor as much as it does. When I saw the black armor and the crosses and heard that cry, I thought, the Emperor has sent us his most faithful. He has sent the ones most like us. We are saved, and we are saved by our own kind. I was right about that. That is the thing I have had to live with. I was right. The Emperor had sent us the ones most like us, and that was the horror, and I did not understand it yet, because in that first hour, kneeling in the Basilica of St. Aurelia, weeping with joy at the answer to my life's prayer, I still believed as you believe now, as everyone believes until the moment they are shown that a warrior who loves the Emperor as much as I did could only ever be a blessing. Let me tell you about the first crack. It was small. They are always small, the first cracks. That is how they get past a faith as thick as mine. The battle in the square was one the Templars carved through the cultists and the demons in a matter of minutes. Magnificent, unstoppable, and I ordered the great doors of the basilica unbarred so that we could go out and greet our saviors, so that 4,000 of the faithful could pour into the square and fall at the feet of the angels and give thanks. And we opened the doors, and we surged out into the square, weeping, singing, reaching for them, and the Black Templars turned their guns on us. Not all of us. That is the thing I need you to understand about the first crack. The reasonable thing. The thing that let me explain it away for a few more terrible hours. They did not massacre us. They opened fire on the edge of the crowd on perhaps 40 people at the western side who had come out of a different door from a different part of the basilica, and they cut them down, 40 of the faithful, in front of 4,000 in the space of 2 seconds. And then they stopped, and the rest of us froze in the square in the sudden silence, not understanding. I ran to the officer. I was a confessor. I had standing. I ran to the nearest giant, a warrior with a great crozius in his hand, the maul of a chaplain, and I cried out why they were faithful. They were coming to thank you. Why did you fire? And the chaplain looked down at me, and his helm was a bare skull worked in black steel, and his voice when it came was calm and certain and kind, and it is the calm and the certainty and the kindness that I have never been able to forget, because there was no cruelty in it at all. He said, those 40 had been in the Western Undercroft. The blood cult held the Western Undercroft. Any soul that was in the Western Undercroft may have been exposed to the touch of the enemy. Exposure is corruption, and corruption cannot be permitted to leave a battlefield, because corruption spreads, and a single tainted soul carried out of this square could damn a world we have not yet reached. We do not have the time to test 40 souls for taint. We have the time to be certain. So we are certain. It is a mercy, Confessor. Their souls go to the Emperor clean, before the taint could take root. You should be glad. And then he turned back to the war, because there was more war. There is always more war. And I stood in the square with the bodies of 40 of my faithful cooling on the flagstones. And I told myself, because I still had my 60 years of faith, and it was fighting for its life. I told myself that he was right, that it was a mercy, that the angels knew things I did not, that exposure was corruption, that better 40 die clean than one damn a world. I had preached exactly that logic, in fact, many times. Better 1,000 innocent die than one heretic live. I had said those words from the pulpit. I had made congregations nod. I just had never, in 60 years, stood in the square and watched the words land on people I knew. That was the first crack. And through it, over the next 3 days, everything I believed came pouring out, and what came in to replace it is the thing I am going to spend the rest of this sermon describing, and it is the thing they will kill me for, and it is true. And may the Emperor have mercy on me for how true it is. Chapter 2. The Unraveling. You are still here. Fewer of you than a moment ago I saw some leave, and I bless them. They are the wise ones, but most of you are still here. And I know why, and I will name it, because naming it is my whole purpose now. You are still here because you want to believe I am wrong. You loved the angels too. You knelt in this basilica and wept when they came, as I did. And now I am telling you a thing that threatens the most beautiful belief you have. And you are staying, not to be persuaded, but to catch me in the error that will let you keep your faith. I understand. I stayed too for 3 days, waiting for the Templars to prove me wrong. Let me tell you what I saw while I waited. They saved Palentine by destroying it, and I want to be precise about the method, because the method is the horror, and the method is not madness that is the thing no one is prepared for. The Black Templars were not insane. They were not out of control. Everything they did on Palentine was deliberate, disciplined, and by their own creed, which I will come to entirely correct. They moved through the dying world like a surgeon through a cancer, and a surgeon does not hate the healthy tissue he cuts away to be safe. He simply does not weigh it very heavily against the life of the patient. To the Black Templars, the patient was the Imperium, the vast abstract body of mankind, and Palentine 4 billion souls. My whole world, my whole life. Palentine was tissue. Some of it was cancer, some of it was healthy, and the Templars did not have the time or the inclination to painstakingly separate the two, because the crusade does not wait, so they cut wide. Wide margins, the way you cut wide margins when you value certainty over the tissue, and the wide margins were people, and I watched them cut. They burned the Basilica of St. Torvald, because the blood cult had held its lower levels, burned it with 3,000 refugees sheltering in the upper galleries, who had not been anywhere near the cult, who were as faithful as I am. And when the district confessor of St. Torvald threw himself before the marshal and begged for the 3,000, the marshal, his name was Brune. Marshal Brune, and I will remember it until I die, the marshal said. I cannot spare a company to evacuate and screen 3,000 potentially exposed souls while the enemy holds the eastern spires. The eastern spires threaten the whole hive. 3,000 against a hive. I have made harder trades before breakfast, Confessor. Stand aside or burn with them. It makes no difference to the arithmetic. And he burned St. Torvald, and the 3,000 with it, and moved his company to the eastern spires, and took the eastern spires, and saved the hive. He was right. That is the thing. Weigh it yourself, 3,000 possibly tainted refugees against a hive of 40 million, and you will get the same answer he got. And getting the same answer is how you become him. Let me tell you what it was to be a citizen of Palentine in those 3 days, because the propaganda never shows you this, and it is the whole of the unraveling, and it is a thing that has happened on 10,000 worlds and been recorded on none. We had prayed for the angels, and the angels had come, and now we lived in the presence of the angels, and the presence of the angels was a terror greater than the enemy they had come to fight. Understand that. The blood cult was a horror, but it was a horror we understood. It was hatred. It wanted us dead. It was an enemy, and an enemy is a thing the soul knows how to face. The Black Templars were something the soul has no defense against. A savior you feared more than the thing you were saved from. When a Templar came down your street, you did not run to him weeping with gratitude, not after the first day. You pressed yourself into a doorway, and you prayed he would not notice you, because being noticed by a Black Templar was a coin flip. You did not want to call. He might fortify your district and spare you, or he might determine that your district was compromised and cleanse it, and you could not tell which he would decide, and there was no appeal, and his decision took less than a second, and it was final. We lived those 3 days, the way you would live with a wrathful God actually walking among you, not the comfortable, distant God of the sermons, but a real one, present, enormous, righteous, and utterly unpredictable in its mercy. And I promise you there is no more frightening way to live. And I preached that God's coming as a joy for 60 years. The children stopped pointing at them. That is the detail I give the congregations who do not believe me, the ones who still have the pictures of golden angels above their beds. On the first day, the children of Palentine ran to the windows to see the angels, exactly as I had, cheering, because they had been raised as I raised Ren, to love the black armor. By the second day, the children had stopped going to the windows. By the third day, when the shadow of a Templar fell across a street, the mothers of Palentine pulled their children back from the light into the dark of the Habs and covered their mouths and prayed in a world where mothers pull their children away from the Emperor's angels and into the shadows to survive, is a world that has learned something about the angels that no sermon will ever admit, and it learned it in 3 days, and it will never unlearn it. And the pictures came down off the walls all across Palentine that week and were not put back up, and the Ministorum called it a crisis of faith and screened the population for taint, and it was not a crisis of faith. It was the opposite. It was faith meeting its own fulfillment and recoiling. We had finally been shown what we were praying for, and we stopped praying for it, and they called that heresy and took our children to be certain. I want to name precisely what the horror of their presence was, because it is a specific horror, and it is not the one you would expect. It was not that they killed. We had been surrounded by killing for 3 days. The blood cult killed, the demons killed. Killing was the weather. The specific horror of the Black Templars was that they killed without regarding us at all, that in the presence of the enemy, we had at least mattered enough to be hated, and in the presence of our saviors, we did not matter enough to be noticed. The demon that came down your street wanted your death. It saw you. It desired you. You were the point of its attention. And there is a terrible dignity in being wanted even by a monster. The Templar that came down your street did not want your death and did not want your life. It wanted the enemy at the far end of the street, and you were between it and the enemy, and it would go through you to reach the enemy, the way a man walks through tall grass to reach a door. And the grass is not hated and not spared. It is simply not weighed. And to be not weighed by a god you have worshipped your whole life is a specific and unprecedented agony that the blood cult, for all its horrors, never inflicted on us. The enemy made us victims. Our saviors made us scenery. And I have come to believe that being made scenery by the thing you love is a deeper wound than being made a victim by the thing you fear. Because the victim is still a person to his killer, and the scenery is not a person to anyone. And the Black Templars turned 4 billion worshippers into scenery in 3 days, without once intending us any harm, and that not intending, that vast holy indifference to us as individual souls, was the coldest thing on a world of fire. I tried once to make one of them see a single soul. Not Ren before Ren, on the second day, when I still thought it was possible. There was a family sheltering in a sacristy. The Templars meant to clear a mother, a father, 3 children, faithful people, plainly uncorrupted, terrified. And I threw myself before the sword brother leading the clearance, and I did the thing a confessor does, the thing I am good at. I made them particular. I told him their names. I told him the mother sang in the choir of St. Aurelia, that the eldest boy was to be confirmed next feast day, that the baby was called after the local saint. I made them people, in words, as vividly as 60 years of preaching had taught me to, because I truly believed that if I could only make him see them, see the individual souls, and not the abstract contested district, his heart would turn, because that is how it works with human beings. That is the whole basis of mercy. You make the abstraction particular, and the heart follows. And the sword brother listened to me name them, patiently, to the end. And then he said, "I do not doubt they are as you say, Confessor. It changes nothing. I am not clearing this sacristy because I believe them corrupt. I am clearing it because I cannot prove them clean, and the crusade cannot advance on unproven ground, and their names and their choir and their feast day are not proof. You have told me who they are. I did not ask who they are. Who they are is not a military quantity. And he cleared the sacristy. And I understood that the one tool I had, the only power a confessor possesses, the power to make a soul particular, to turn a number back into a person, the one weapon I had carried my whole life, was useless against them, because their whole creed is built precisely on refusing to let the particular soul outweigh the abstract certainty, and a being trained to that refusal is a being my entire art cannot touch. I make people out of numbers. They make numbers out of people. We are exact opposites, the Confessor and the Templar, performing inverse operations on the same souls, and theirs is stronger, because theirs wins wars, and mine only comforts the survivors. And that is the order of things in the Imperium. The number makers go first, and the people makers come after, to tend what is left, and to preach that the numbers were sacrifices, and to keep the faith that makes the next generation kneel. I followed them for 3 days. I appointed myself their chronicler, their conscience, their beggar running from atrocity to atrocity, trying to intercede, trying to save the ones I could, and mostly failing, and learning hour by hour the shape of the thing that had come to save us. And the shape of it was this. The Black Templars did not come to save the people of Palentine. They came to defeat the enemy of the Emperor on Palentine, and the people were terrain. Favorable terrain, where we could be used. They would happily fortify a district full of the faithful, spend our militia as auxiliaries, accept our worship. Unfavorable terrain, where we were in the way, we were cleared, and there was no malice in either. That was the part that unraveled me. A man who hates you can be reasoned with, or hated back, or understood. The Black Templars did not hate the people of Palentine. They barely saw us. We were the ground their crusade was fought over, and you do not hate the ground, and you do not spare the ground. You simply take it whatever is growing on it. There was a man named Aldrich Sohn, a captain of the Palentine Planetary Defense Force, a hard good soldier who had fought the blood cult for 3 days before the Templars came, and lost most of his company doing it, and held the Gate of Martyrs against the demons with laser guns and courage and nothing else. I mention him because his fate taught me a thing about the Templars that the Burnings did not. When the Black Templars reached the Gate of Martyrs, Captain Sohn and his survivors, perhaps 200 exhausted, bleeding, faithful men who had held the line for 3 days, came out to join the crusade, to fight alongside the angels, to be part of their own world's salvation. And the Templars used them. That is the thing. They did not spurn the PDF. They deployed them as the first wave into the worst ground, ahead of the Astartes, because the PDF were expendable and the Astartes were not. And a wise commander spends the cheap troops first. Captain Sohn understood this. He was a soldier. He accepted it. What broke him, he told me this himself in the aftermath, before he walked into the wastes and did not come back. What broke him was that the Templars spent his men not carelessly, but thoughtfully, calculating exactly how many Palentine lives equaled 1 meter of ground, or 1 saved battle brother, and the calculation was in the ledger, in the open, and Captain Sohn heard a sword brother say of his company, "The auxiliaries will suffice to absorb the initial assault. Their loss is acceptable." His men, his 200 faithful survivors, reduced to the auxiliaries will suffice to absorb. And Sohn realized that to the beings he had prayed to his whole life, he and his men and his entire world were a quantity of shock-absorbing material. And he fought on anyway, because what else was there? And afterward, he walked into the ash wastes and did not come back, and I do not blame him. And I have thought since that he was one more casualty the Templars would have logged, if they logged such things as acceptable. I tried to tell myself this was war, and war is terrible, and terrible things happen in war. But I had seen war before. Palentine had a planetary defense force. I had given last rites on battlefields. I knew what ordinary war looked like. This was not that. There was an incident on the second day that marked, for me, the exact place where war ended and the other thing began, and I set it down because it is small enough to hold and because it contains the whole of what the Black Templars are. A district confessor of the Eastern Spires, a colleague of mine, a gentleman named Halbrek, who had baptized half his Hab zone, brought a delegation of his people to the Templars to report the enemy, to tell them which under-basilicas the cult held, which passages the daemons used, information paid for in the lives of his parishioners who had scouted it, offered freely, gladly, as loyal subjects helping their saviors. And the sword brother who received them took the information and thanked them for it in the flat way the Templars thank anything, and then had the entire delegation detained because they had come from a contested district and might be exposed, and he could not act on intelligence from possibly tainted sources without first being certain of the sources, and being certain meant screening, and screening a dozen souls to the Templar standard meant, in the time available, killing them. And so he killed the delegation that had come to help him, using the very information they had brought while their bodies were still warm. And it was not betrayal, because betrayal requires that he had ever considered them allies rather than assets, and he had not. Halbrek survived only because he had stayed at the edge, and he came to me that night with his mind broken in a specific way I recognized, because it was the way mine was breaking. And he said the thing that I have kept. They are not on our side, Iona. That is the mistake we all make. We think they are on our side. They are not on our side. They are on the Emperor's side, and we are not the Emperor, and we never understood that those were different things. Halbrek walked into the wastes 3 days after Captain Sohn. The Eastern Spires are named for martyrs. They have some new ones now, unrecorded, who died bringing gifts to their gods. Ordinary soldiers, even hard ones, even cruel ones, retain some sense that the civilians are the point that the war is being fought for the people, and so the people matter, at least as the reason. The Black Templars had lost that entirely, if they had ever had it. To them, the war was not fought for the people. The war was fought for the Emperor, and the Emperor is an idea, a god, an abstraction on a golden throne a galaxy away, and you cannot save an abstraction by protecting the actual frightened human beings in front of you. You can only save it by winning, by purging, by advancing the crusade. And so the actual frightened human beings had become, to humanity's greatest defenders, an irrelevance at best and an obstacle at worst. And I realized on the second day, standing in the ash of St. Torvald, that the Black Templars were defending humanity while having entirely stopped being able to see humans. Let me tell you about Ren. I have not wanted to. I have put it off. But this sermon is worthless without Ren, so. Ren was my acolyte, 12 years old, an orphan of the Hab districts, whom I had taken into the Confessor's house 3 years before, because she had a voice like a bell and a faith like a furnace, and no one else to raise her. She was the joy of my old age. She was more faithful than I was, in the pure blazing way that only children can be. She believed in the angels the way I had believed at her age, completely. And when the Templars came, she was the most overjoyed soul in the Basilica. And through the whole 3 days of horror, as my own faith came apart, Ren's held, because she was 12, and she had decided that everything terrible she was seeing was part of the angels' holy plan, and I did not have the heart to take that from her, so I let her keep it, and it killed her. On the third day, the Templars were purging the processional of martyrs, a great pilgrim road, choked with refugees, that ran through a district the cult had partly held. They were doing it the efficient way, the certain way. Flamers, from both ends, driving the crowd inward, because a flamer cleanses, and fire leaves no taint. And a purge by fire is a purge you can be certain of. And Ren, my Ren, who still believed, who ran toward the angels, the way I had taught her, Ren broke from the crowd and ran toward a Templar with the flamer, her arms open, her bell voice raised, singing a hymn of welcome, running to greet her savior in the middle of a purge. The Templar saw her. I have to believe he saw her. They see everything. Their eyes are built to see everything. He saw a 12-year-old girl running toward him with her arms open, singing, and he did not stop the flamer because she had come from the crowd in the processional, and the crowd in the processional was being purged, and there was no category in his creed for a faithful child running to thank me that overrode the category of possibly exposed soul in a purge zone, and so he did not even pause. He did not swerve the flame. He was not cruel. He simply did not weigh her, because his creed had taught him not to weigh individual souls against the certainty of the purge. And a creed that has taught you not to weigh the individual soul is a creed that will let you burn a singing child without breaking stride, in the name of the God who is love, and call it mercy, and believe it. I did not get to her in time. I want that on the record too. In this last sermon, I ran, and I was old, and I did not get to her in time, and my Ren went into the Emperor's light singing, burned by an angel, and the angel moved on down the processional, cleansing, certain, righteous, and never knew her name, and would not have altered a single action if he had. I tried after Ren to do the thing a confessor does to make it mean something, to find the sermon in it, because that is my whole training, to take a death and give it shape and comfort. I stood over the ash of my acolyte, and I reached for the words I had said over 10,000 deaths. She is with the Emperor now. She died in his light. Her sacrifice was not in vain, and the words came out of me from habit. And then they stopped, because I heard them, truly heard them, for the first time in 60 years. She died in his light. An angel of his light had burned her. Her sacrifice was not in vain. She had not sacrificed anything. She had been spent, an acceptable casualty, a rounding error in a purge, and to call that a sacrifice was to do to her memory exactly what the Templars had done to her body, to fold her into a story that made her death useful and clean when it had been neither. I had spent 60 years turning the deaths of the innocent into comfort with words, and standing over Ren, I understood that this was my part in the machine, that the confessors are the ones who come after the angels and make the burning make sense, who tell the survivors that the acceptable casualties were holy sacrifices, who launder the horror into faith so that the people will pray for the angels to come again. I was not the Templars' victim. I was their chaplain. I was the part of the same apparatus that handled the aftermath, that took what they did and made it preachable. And I had been doing it my whole life, for every crusade that had ever touched a world I served. And Ren was only the first acceptable casualty I had ever happened to love. And that was the only thing that made her different from the thousands I had comfortably buried before. And it should not have taken loving one of them for me to see it. And it did. And that is my sin. And it is the sin of every gentle preacher in the Imperium, and I confess it. That was the day my faith died. Not my faith in the Emperor hold that distinction. It matters. It is the whole of the next part of this sermon. My faith in the Emperor survived. Throne, help me. It survives even now. What died on the processional of martyrs was something else. What died was my ability to tell the difference between the angels who had come to save us and the demons they had come to save us from. Because I had just watched an angel of the Emperor burn a singing child without pity, without remorse, without fear, no pity, no remorse, no fear. Their own creed, their own cry, and I had watched the blood cult do the same thing to the same kind of child 3 days before. And I stood on the processional of martyrs with the ash of my acolyte on my robes, and I could not, for the life of me and the death of my faith, tell you which of the two had been the greater horror. Chapter 3. The Contradiction. Now we come to the part that is heresy. Everything before this was merely grief, and grief is permitted, even to a confessor. You may weep for the innocent dead, and the ministorum will call it compassion. But what I am about to say is not grief. It is a comparison. And it is the comparison that no one in the Imperium is permitted to make. And I am going to make it anyway, slowly, so that you cannot mistake it. And when I have made it, you will understand why they will take me, and you will understand why they are right to, and you will understand this is the terrible part, that being right to take me does not make it untrue. Let me put the two things side by side. That is all heresy is, most of the time, not a lie, a comparison the powerful cannot afford to have made. On one side, the blood cult of Palentine and the demons of the blood god. What were they? They were a force of absolute devotion to a god, who believed that killing in that god's name was the highest form of worship, who felt no pity and no remorse and no fear, who raised towers of skulls to the glory of their god, who fought without end because their god demanded eternal war, who hated the enemies of their god with a purity that admitted no mercy and no doubt, and who considered their own deaths in battle to be a blessing, a gift, a fast road to their god's side. On the other side, the Black Templars. What were they? They were a force of absolute devotion to a god, who believed that killing in that god's name was the highest form of worship. Is not the killing of a heretic the greatest of prayers? I have heard a Templar chaplain say those words, who felt no pity and no remorse and no fear by their own proud creed, who left the battlefields of Palentine, hung with the skulls and wreckage of the slain, as monuments to the Emperor, who had fought without end for 10,000 years, because their crusade demanded eternal war, who hated the enemies of their god with a purity that admitted no mercy and no doubt, and who considered their own deaths in battle to be a blessing, a gift, a fast road to their god's side. There is a counter-argument, and I must make it against myself, because a confessor who will not argue against her own heresy is not being honest, and honesty is all I have left. The counter-argument is this: the difference is the object of worship, and the object of worship is everything. The blood god is a thing of pure malice, wanting only slaughter for its own sake, an appetite with no purpose beyond feeding. The Emperor was a being who sought to save mankind, to shepherd it into a golden age, to end exactly the kind of suffering the dark gods feast on. So the demon kills for killing, and the Templar kills for salvation. And though the killing looks the same, the reason is opposite, and the reason is the moral truth of the act. And therefore the Templar is holy, and the daemon is damned. And my whole comparison is a trick of the surface that ignores the substance beneath. I made that argument to myself. I made it for 2 days, in the ruins, because I wanted it to be true, because it was the argument that would give me back my faith. And here is why it failed. And I give you the failure because it is the hinge of the whole sermon. The reason does not reach the act. The woman burned in the processional does not experience the Templar's holy purpose. She experiences the fire which is identical to the fire the demon would have used. Ren, singing, running, burning, did not receive a salvation different in any particular from the damnation the blood cult would have visited on her. She received the same flame from a being screaming the same devotion and died the same death. And the fact that one flame was lit for love of the Emperor and the other for love of the blood god made no difference whatsoever to Ren, who was the person it was actually happening to. The moral difference in the reason is real, but it exists only in the mind of the one doing the killing and in the ledgers of the gods. It does not exist anywhere in the experience of the killed, and the killed are the people. The people are humanity, and so from the perspective of the very humanity that is supposedly being saved, the salvation and the damnation are the same event, felt the same way, producing the same ash. The reason matters to God. It does not matter to the burning child. And I am a shepherd of burning children, not of gods. And from where I stand, in the ash, holding what is left of my acolyte, the comforting difference in the reason is a thing the powerful tell each other to sleep at night, and it does not reach the ground, and on the ground there is only the fire, and the fire is the same fire. Read those two descriptions again. I did, over and over, in the days after Palentine, sitting in the ruins with the survivors, and I still cannot find the line that separates them. Word for word, act for act, they are the same. Absolute devotion to a god, killing as worship. No pity, no remorse, no fear. Skulls raised to the god's glory. Eternal war. Hatred without mercy. Death welcomed as reward. That is the creed of the blood god, and it is the creed of the Black Templars. And the only difference between them, the only difference, I have searched for another, and there is none, is the name of the god they say it to, and the direction they point the slaughter. And here is the contradiction that gives this sermon its name, the thing that broke me most completely, because it is the thing the Templars themselves would be most horrified to hear, and it is the truest thing about them. The Black Templars hate the warp, above all things, above Xenos, above traitors. They hate the warp and its powers, and everything touched by it, the witch, the demon, the psyker, the corrupted. Their hatred of the warp is so total that they will not permit psykers even among their own ranks. Alone among the Emperor's angels, the Black Templars have no librarians, no sanctioned witches, because to them the smallest touch of the warp is an abomination that cannot be tolerated even in service. Their whole identity is the hatred of the warp. Consider what that costs them and what it reveals. Every other chapter of the Adeptus Astartes fields, librarians, psychic warriors, sanctioned and disciplined, who can sense the daemon before it strikes, who can shield their brothers' minds, who can meet the warp's power with power of their own. They are, by every practical measure, one of the most valuable assets a space marine force can have, especially against the very demonic enemies the Templars most often fight, and the Black Templars refuse them. They go into war against the warp deliberately blinded to the warp, deliberately weakened against their favorite foe, deliberately without the one tool best suited to the fight, because tolerating even a sanctioned, holy, useful touch of the warp among their own is to them unthinkable, a compromise with the enemy's substance that they would rather lose battles than make. And this is madness tactically. It has cost them dearly across 10,000 years. And it is also the purest possible expression of what they are, because it proves that their hatred of the warp is not strategic, is not about winning, is not reasoned. It is absolute. It is a passion held past the point of self-interest, held to the point of self-harm, and a passion held past reason, past self-interest, past survival, is not a policy. It is a devotion. It is faith of the most total kind. and faith of the most total kind, aimed at the warp with that intensity, is I keep arriving here. Every path leads here, is the exact emotional substance the warp is made of. They hate the warp so purely that the purity of the hatred is itself a warp thing. A fanaticism so absolute it would be indistinguishable if you strip the object away from the fanaticism of a demon for its god. They have made themselves the perfect anti-warp weapon by becoming, in the structure of their souls, perfectly warp-like. And the refusal of the librarians is the proof, because it is the moment their hatred chooses purity over victory, and only a devotion, never a strategy, chooses purity over victory. And consider the crusade itself, the eternal crusade, the thing I preached most gloriously of all 10,000 years of unbroken war. No homeworld, no rest, no peace, no end. A war that has raged since the founding of the Imperium, and is sworn to rage until the last enemy of the Emperor is dead, which is to say, forever, because the enemies of the Emperor are infinite, and the last one will never die. I preached that as the purest devotion, and it is. It is also examined honestly, the precise structure of the blood god's own desire, whose whole being is eternal war, who does not want war to end and ended war, feeds him nothing, who wants only for the killing to continue without limit and without conclusion, world without end. The Black Templars have vowed exactly that. They do not fight toward a peace. A chapter that achieved a final peace would have no reason to exist, and they know it. And so their vow is not to win the war, but to wage it, eternally. And a being whose sacred purpose is the eternal waging of war, rather than its conclusion is, in the deepest structure of its will, aligned with the god of eternal war, whatever name it screams. The Imperium's most devoted crusaders have sworn the blood god's own oath, endless war, without end, as the highest good, and pointed it at his worshippers. And the pointing is real, and the oath is real, and they are the same oath. And this is the third mirror. And there are more, there are always more. Every facet of them reflects him, because they are made of the same substance as he is. Feeling turned to fanaticism, turned to war. And the only variable in the whole equation, the only free term, is the name. And the name is doing all the moral work. And a name is a very thin thing to hang the difference between salvation and damnation on. And yet, it is the only thing there is. And the warp, hear me, this is the heresy. This is the thing the warp is made of, exactly what they are. The powers of the warp, the dark gods, are not aliens. They are not invaders from outside. They are made of feeling of the overflow of mortal emotion, pooled across the ages until it woke and hungered. The blood god is made of rage and hatred, and the joy of slaughter, and the zealot's certainty that killing is holy. Every drop of absolute, merciless, righteous, ecstatic, martial hatred that any mortal has ever felt has flowed into the warp and fed him and made him what he is. He is the god of the feeling the Black Templars feel every single moment of every single day. Their rage feeds him. Their zeal feeds him. Their ecstatic, pitiless, eternal hatred of his own worshippers is, in its emotional substance, indistinguishable from worship of him. It is the same rage, pointed the other way. And the warp does not care which way a feeling points. It only cares how strong it is. And there is no stronger source of the blood god's own essence in the entire galaxy than the 10,000 years of holy hatred pouring off the Black Templars in their eternal crusade. I did not arrive at this by cleverness. I want that understood, because a clever heresy is a chosen thing. And this was not chosen, it was forced on me by my own eyes. I arrived at it because I stood in a cathedral square on the second day and watched a thing that I have never been able to explain any other way. There was a demon of the blood god cornered in the square of the 1,000 candles, a great brazen thing, and there was a Black Templar facing it alone, a sword brother who had outrun his squad, and I watched them fight. And at the height of it, something happened that broke the last wall in me. The demon, in the ecstasy of the fight, threw back its head and roared its devotion to its god, a sound of pure, joyful, worshipful rage, the sound of a thing that exists only to kill for its god, and is doing exactly that and could not be happier. And the Black Templar, in the same instant, in the ecstasy of the same fight, threw back his head and roared his devotion to his god, and it was the same sound. Not similar, the same. Two beings in the joy of holy slaughter, screaming their love of their gods, and if I had closed my eyes, I could not have told you which roar came from the angel and which from the demon, because they were the same roar, because they were the same joy, because they were feeling the same thing, and the thing they were both feeling was the ecstasy of killing for a god, which is the exact and precise substance of the blood god himself. I opened my eyes, and I saw two worshippers of the same feeling trying to kill each other over the name of it. And I understood that the name was the only thing they disagreed about, and that the warp does not record names, it records feelings, and that both of them, in that square, in that shared scream, were praying to the same god, and only one of them knew it. Do you understand what I am saying? The Imperium's most dedicated enemies of the warp are one of the warp's greatest feeding grounds. The Black Templars hate chaos with a passion so pure that the passion itself is chaos, is the raw stuff the blood god is made of, so that every time a Templar screams his hatred of the demon and buries his blade in it in an ecstasy of righteous fury, he is, in the only currency that matters to the warp, praying to the very god he thinks he is killing. They are the abhorrers of the warp, who are, in their souls, in the texture of their feeling, the most warp-like beings in the Imperium of man. That is the contradiction. That is why I named this sermon what I named it. They are the Imperium's greatest contradiction, because they are its purest defenders and its purest embodiment of the thing it is defended against, at the same time, in the same act, and they cannot see it. And if you showed it to them, they would kill you, because a Black Templar shown that his hatred is a form of worship would have to either stop hating, which would end him, or kill the one who showed him, and they never stop hating. So let me give you the chaplain, because I met him properly on the third day, and he is the proof. His name was Wolfheart, the chaplain of the crusade, and a Templar chaplain is a preacher my own opposite number, my mirror, a keeper of faith and a giver of sermons, exactly as I was, except that his congregation was angels and his sermons were war. And on the third day, having lost Ren, having lost my faith in the difference between salvation and damnation, I went to find him. Because I was a confessor and he was a confessor, and I thought, in my grief, that one preacher might be able to say to another the thing I could not say to the warriors. I found him giving a sermon to his brothers before an assault, and I stood at the edge, and I listened to a Black Templar chaplain preach, and I heard my own voice. That is the thing I have to make you feel. Wolfheart's sermon was my sermon. The cadences were mine. The theology was mine. The love of the Emperor, the hatred of his enemies, the glory of sacrifice, the certainty of the righteous cause. Every beat of it was a beat I had preached from this very pulpit for 60 years. He was preaching, word for word, the faith of Palentine, and in his mouth, in the mouths of 8-foot killers about to purge a district, that faith, my faith, our faith, the beautiful, warm, total faith I had loved my whole life, that faith was a thing of absolute horror, a call to pitiless slaughter, a sanctification of the burning of children, and it was the same words. I had not understood, in 60 years, what I was actually preaching, because I had preached it to candle makers and choristers, to gentle people who could only ever enact a fraction of it. Wolfheart preached it to gods of war who could enact all of it, every word, to the last terrible logical conclusion, and hearing my own theology preached to beings capable of fulfilling it completely, I finally heard what it actually said. And what it actually said was the creed of the blood god, with the Emperor's name written over the top. Let me give you a piece of Wolfheart's sermon, as near as I can remember it, so that you can hear it too, and hear what I heard in it. He was preaching over the kneeling ranks of his brothers, his skull helm in the crook of his arm, his crozius raised, and his voice was the voice of a preacher who has never once doubted, and this is what he said. Brothers, the Emperor watches. Feel his gaze upon you and be worthy of it. There is no mercy in you, and this is holy mercy as the gap through which the enemy enters, and we have sealed that gap with hatred, and our hatred is a wall around mankind. There is no doubt in you, and this is holy doubt is the whisper of the warp, and we have burned it out of ourselves, and our certainty is a fortress. There is no fear in you, and this is holy fear is the currency of the daemon, and we have paid it all away, and now the daemon has nothing to buy us with. Go into the enemy and give them no pity, for pity is a sin against the Emperor's justice. Give them no remorse, for to regret the death of a heretic is to love the heretic. Give them no fear, for the Emperor is with you and the Emperor does not fear. Kill in his name until you can no longer stand, and when you fall forward into the enemy, so that your last act is one more death for the God who made you. This is the whole of the law. There is no other law. No pity, no remorse, no fear. There was a neophyte at that sermon, a boy, an aspirant, not yet a full battle brother, kneeling at the back of the ranks the way the youngest always kneel at the back, and I found my eyes drawn to him, because he was the closest thing to a human child in that assembly of demigods, and because I was still looking, even then, for the seam, for the one of them who might still be reachable. He could not have been more than 15, this boy, taken from some world, remade, kneeling among the angels. And I watched him during Wolfheart's sermon, and I watched the creed go into him. He was not yet fully hardened. You could still see, faintly, the human boy under the aspirant, and you could see the sermon working on him the way water works on stone, and by the end of it, no pity, no remorse, no fear his young face had set into the same expression as all the others. The expression I had at first mistaken for serenity, and had learned to read as absence, the amputation completed in real time, and I understood that I was watching a child have the three things cut out of him that would have let him be a person, and that he was consenting to it, gladly, because he had been taught that the cutting was holiness, and that in a year he would burn a wren of his own and not break stride, and that no one had done anything to him that had not been done to me, in gentler doses, from a pulpit, by a preacher who loved him. The only difference between that neophyte and every child I had ever confirmed in the faith of Palentine was dosage and power. I gave my children a sip of the creed and sent them to make candles. The Templars gave that boy the whole cup and the strength to drain it, but it was the same cup. I brewed it. I have brewed it for 60 years and handed it to children, and only when I saw it drunk to the bottom did I taste what was in it, and the ranks of angels answered him no pity, no remorse, no fear in a low unison that shook the stone, and I stood at the edge of it, an old confessor, and I realized two things at once, and both of them were the end of me. The first was that it was a beautiful sermon. Throne helped me. It was beautiful, better than mine, purer than mine, more certain than anything I had ever managed in 60 years. And part of me, the old preacher, thrilled to it. wanted to answer it. No pity, no remorse, no fear. Felt the pull of it in my chest, and understood that I could have preached that sermon, that I had half preached it 1,000 times, that it was the logical perfection of everything I had ever stood at a pulpit and said. And the second was that if you took every word of that sermon and changed only the name of the god, if you put the blood god's name where the emperor's name was, and left every other word exactly as it stood, it would be, without the alteration of a single instruction, a perfect sermon of Khorne. No mercy, no doubt, no fear. Kill in the god's name until you fall. To regret a death is to betray the god. That is the creed of the blood god, word for word, and Wulfhart preached it to the emperor's angels as the whole of the law, and they answered it as holy, and it was holy, and it was Khorne, and those were the same thing. And I have never been able to make them not be the same thing. And I have tried, standing at the edge of that sermon, for the rest of my life. I did not confront him. I want to be honest, in this last sermon, about my own cowardice. I did not confront Chaplain Wulfhart. I listened to him preach my own faith as a call to horror, and I understood everything. And I said nothing, and I crept away, because I was afraid the one thing a Black Templar is forbidden to be, the thing they had cut out of themselves. No fear, I was afraid, and my fear, in that moment, was the most human thing left on Palentine, and I have come to believe it was the only thing that kept me from becoming what they are. Fear, doubt, pity, the three things their creed forbids. The three things that were, I understood, standing outside Wulfhart's sermon, the only things that separate a defender of humanity from a horror wearing a halo. No pity, no remorse, no fear. They say it as a boast, it is a confession. It is a precise list of the 3 amputations required to turn a faithful man into a devout monster, and the Black Templars perform all 3 on themselves, deliberately, as a sacrament, and call the result holiness. Chapter 4. The Devout Monster. We are near the end now, and near the door I can hear them in the narthex. Someone has already gone for the Arbites. I do not blame them. I told you I would not, so I will be quick, and I will show you the thing itself, the devout monster, at the height of its devotion. And then I will ask you my question one last time, and then you may do what you must. On the 4th day, the last day, the day Palentine was declared cleansed, I saw the Emperor's champion. I must tell you first how he was chosen, because the choosing is the thing that proves it is not a corruption, but a design, that the devout monster is not an accident of one warrior gone too far, but the deliberate sacred product of the whole chapter's faith. The night before the final assault, the Black Templars held a vigil. I was permitted to observe it, a confessor may observe a vigil, and by then I think Chaplain Wulfhart had decided I was harmless, a grieving old woman to be tolerated, and I watched them prepare to select the Emperor's champion, and it was the most religious thing I have ever witnessed, and I have spent my life in religion. The whole crusade knelt in the ruined nave, hundreds of angels in black armor, in silence, in the candlelight, and they prayed, not the frenzied battle prayers of the assault, but a deep, still communal prayer, for the Emperor to send them a sign, to reach down into the crusade, and mark the one brother whose faith was purest, whose zeal was most complete, who should bear the armor of faith and the black sword into the final battle as the living vessel of them all. And they waited, and in the deep of the night, one of them rose, a sword brother, whose name I never learned, an ordinary warrior of the crusade until that moment rose, shaking, with tears of blood at the corners of his eyes, and said that he had seen the vision every champion sees, the vision of the Emperor's own duel with the arch-traitor at the dawn of the Imperium, and that the Emperor had shown it to him, and that he was chosen, and the whole crusade wept with joy. Hundreds of angels, the pitiless, the fearless, wept with the purest joy, because the Emperor had reached down and touched them, had answered their prayer, had marked one of their own for glory. And I wept too, at the edge of the nave. That is the thing I have to confess, that even then, even after Ren, even after the processional, the sheer devotion of it reached into me and I wept with them. Because it was beautiful, because it was faith at its absolute purest, because a room full of demigods, weeping with joy at a sign from their god, is the most powerful religious moment a human being can stand inside of. And then, in the morning, they dressed the weeping chosen one in the armor of faith and put the black sword in his hands, and they sent that pure, joyful, faith-drunk being out to do the thing I am about to describe. And the beauty of the vigil and the horror of the battle were the same faith, one night apart, and that is the devout monster. It is made in a moment of genuine holy joy, and then it is pointed at the world. You may not know what an Emperor's champion is. I did not truly until I saw one. It was a phrase in my sermons, a glory I invoked without understanding. The Emperor's champion is a Black Templar chosen not by rank, but by the Emperor's own will, made manifest in a vision before battle, to be the living embodiment of the chapter's faith. He is clad in the armor of faith and given the black sword, and he goes before the crusade as the purest vessel of its zeal. And he is, when he fights, the most complete expression of what the Black Templars are that exists in the galaxy. He is faith made into a weapon and pointed at the enemy. And on the fourth day, in the final assault on the last demon-held basilica, I saw the champion of the Palentine crusade fight, and it is the image I will carry into the Emperor's light, and it is the reason for this whole sermon. I could not tell him from a demon. I mean that with total precision. The final battle was in the Basilica of St. Aurelia, my own basilica, the one where I had wept with joy when the angels came, now the last stronghold of the blood god's demons on Palentine, and it was a battle of red against black, of the blood gods never born against the Emperor's champion and his sword brethren. And I watched it from the high gallery where I had once preached, and I watched the champion fight the greatest of the daemons, a towering thing of brass and rage, and I watched two beings destroy each other in an ecstasy of holy fury in the ruins of my cathedral. And I swear to you before the throne that if you had shown me the two of them in that moment, without their colors, without the cross and the brass, without any mark of which side they served, if you had shown me only their movements, their fury, their joy, the way they screamed their devotion to their gods as they killed, the blood that drenched them both, the skulls that cracked beneath them both, the absolute pitiless, ecstatic certainty that blazed off both of them like heat off a forge, I could not have told you which was the angel and which was the demon. They were the same being. They were the same feeling, wearing two colors, screaming two names, and the feeling was identical, and the feeling was the blood god, and one of them served him knowingly, and one of them served him while screaming his hatred, and to the warp, to the god they both fed, there was no difference at all, and there was no difference to me either, watching from the gallery, and there would have been no difference to you. Let me stay in that battle a moment longer, because it is the image the whole sermon exists to deliver, and I will not have you leave it too quickly. The Basilica of St. Aurelia had a mosaic on its great dome. I had preached beneath it for 60 years, a mosaic of the Emperor enthroned in glory, his angels descending in gold to smite the darkness, the darkness rendered as red-skinned horned things fleeing before the light. I had pointed to that mosaic 10,000 times and said, "See, children, see how the angels drive out the demons. See the difference between the light and the dark." And on the fourth day I stood beneath that mosaic and watched the reality of it. The golden angel versus red demon of my own ceiling made flesh below me. And the reality did not look like the mosaic. In the mosaic, the angel was serene and the demon was foul, and the difference was as plain as gold against red. In the reality, both of them were black with the same blood. Both of them were screaming with the same joy. Both of them moved with the same terrible grace. And both of them were building, with every blow, the same monument, because a Black Templar leaves his battlefields hung with the broken bodies of his enemies as trophies of the Emperor's justice, and a servant of the Blood God leaves his battlefields hung with skulls as offerings, and the mound rising in the center of St. Aurelia's nave, as those two fought, was made of both at once, an indistinguishable heap of the slain. And I could not have told you which broken body was a trophy and which was an offering, because a broken body is a broken body, and the mound does not care what god its makers were screaming, and neither, in the end, did the dead. And the sound. I have to give you the sound, because sound was the thing that finished me. In 60 years of preaching, I had described the war cries of the angels as trumpets, as hymns, as the music of heaven. The sound in the Basilica of St. Aurelia on the fourth day was not trumpets. It was two voices, the champions and the demons, locked in a duet of pure, worshipful rage, rising over the wet crunch of the mound. And it was the ugliest and most terrifying sound I have ever heard. And it was devotion, both voices, the same devotion, and it filled the cathedral where I had led 10,000 gentle hymns, and I understood that this duet of screaming worship over a heap of the dead, this was what all my gentle hymns had actually been about all along, that every soft chorister's anthem to the Emperor's justice had been a diluted, sweetened, survivable version of exactly this scream, that I had spent 60 years teaching children to sing a pretty song whose true and complete performance was two monsters shrieking their love of God over a mound of skulls in a ruined church, and that the pretty song and the shriek were the same song, and I had simply never before heard it sung by someone with the strength to sing it all the way to the end. The champion won. Of course he won. The Emperor's will was in him, and faith is a weapon, and his was purer. He struck the demon down, and he stood over its dissolving corpse in the ruins of the Basilica of St. Aurelia, drenched head to foot in blood, and he threw back his head, and he screamed his triumph to the Emperor, a raw, wordless, ecstatic scream of pure devotion over a mound of the slain. And it was the exact scream the daemon had been screaming a moment before, the exact scream the blood cultists had screamed when they raised their skull towers, the scream of a being in the ecstasy of holy slaughter. And I realized, watching the Emperor's champion scream his love of God over a heap of skulls in my ruined cathedral, that I was looking at the purest expression of the faith I had preached for 60 years, and that it was indistinguishable from damnation, and that this was not a corruption of my faith, but its fulfillment, that the devout monster is not what happens when faith goes wrong. It is what happens when faith goes right, when it is believed absolutely and enacted completely by someone with the power to fulfill it, and that everything gentle and merciful and human in the faith of Palentine had only ever been there because we were too weak to enact the faith fully, and that the Black Templars, being strong enough to enact it fully, had shown me what my faith actually was all along, underneath the candles and the hymns. The champion did not survive the day. I learned that afterward, and it belongs here, because it is the last turn of the horror, and the Templars would call it the most beautiful part. Bearing the Emperor's mark burns a mortal frame, even an Astartes frame. The champion who wins his duel very often dies of the winning, consumed by the very faith that made him victorious, and the Palentine champion was no exception. He struck down the greatest demon and screamed his triumph over the mound, and then, within the hour, his heart gave out, his body spent utterly by the intensity of what had moved through it, and the Black Templars gathered around his corpse and rejoiced, not grieved, rejoiced because to die in the moment of holy victory, consumed by faith, is the finest death their creed knows, the truest fulfillment, the thing every one of them longs for. They envied him. Hundreds of angels stood in the ruin of my cathedral and envied a man who had just been burned to death from the inside by his own devotion. And I understood, watching them, that the champion was not an exception to the Black Templars, but their essence made brief and total, a being so full of faith that the faith itself killed him, gladly, in an ecstasy of slaughter, and that this a life that exists only to be consumed in devoted killing, and to die of it rejoicing is, once again, word for word, the ideal existence of a servant of the blood god, whose highest hope is exactly to be spent utterly in holy slaughter and die in the god's ecstasy. The champion got the demon's own dearest wish, screaming the Emperor's name, and his brothers envied him for it, and I wept in the gallery, and I could no longer tell you for certain whether I was weeping at a tragedy or at a black mass, and then it was over. That is the thing about the devout monster, that the sermons and the horror stories both get wrong. Each in their own way, it does not rampage endlessly. It does not lose control. It does the work, and then it stops, with a discipline as total as its fury. And the stopping is somehow the most alien thing of all. The moment the last demon was banished, the Black Templars simply ceased. The screaming stopped. The killing stopped. Warriors who a heartbeat before had been shrieking their devotion over mounds of the slain went, in an instant, silent and still and businesslike, and began the afterwork of a crusade, recovering their fallen, cataloguing the honors, preparing to withdraw with the calm of clerks closing a ledger. I had braced myself, watching the champion, for beings that could not be switched off, that would turn from the enemy to us in their frenzy, and it did not happen. And its not happening taught me the last piece of what they are. They are not out of control. They are perfectly in control. The frenzy is not a madness that seizes them. It is a tool they take up and set down, a holy rage they generate on purpose, aim, expend, and extinguish on command. And that is worse than madness, immeasurably worse, because a madman is not responsible, and these beings are responsible for every scream and every skull, chose each one, meant each one, and could have stopped at any moment, and chose not to until the work was done. The demon rages because it cannot do otherwise. The Black Templar rages because he has decided to, and could stop, and does not, and that decision, the deliberate, disciplined, switch-on, switch-off cultivation of an ecstasy of holy slaughter, is a thing no demon is capable of. And it does not make the Templar better than the demon. It makes him something the demon cannot be. A monster by choice, renewed each dawn, a horror that volunteers. I saw the withdrawal, and I will end this chapter with it, because it is the image that sits beside the champion's scream as the two poles of what they are, and you need both. When the work was done, the Black Templars left, and they left in perfect order, in a great procession through the ruins of Sanctuary, primers toward their waiting ships. banners high, chanting not the frenzied war cry now, but a low grave hymn, a marching prayer. Beautiful. The most beautiful thing. Hundreds of black-armored angels processing through the ash they had made, singing the praises of the Emperor, their armor scorched and their banners torn and their honor chains heavy with the day's new trophies, and the surviving people of Palentine lined the processional route to watch them go. And here is the image. The people did not cheer, and they did not weep, and they did not curse. They knelt, all of them, the whole broken, traumatized remnant of a world, knelt in the ash as the angels passed, in silence, with their faces down, and I could not tell, watching from the steps of my ruined basilica, whether they knelt in worship or in terror, whether they were adoring their saviors or abasing themselves before a passing wrath, praying it would notice them or praying it would not. And I realized that they themselves could not have told you either, that worship and terror had become, on Palentine, the same posture, the same bent neck, the same lowered eyes, indistinguishable. Because when the thing you worship and the thing you fear are the same thing, the body has only one response, and it is to kneel and to hope. That is the last thing I saw of the Black Templars, a whole world on its knees in the ash, watching its saviors sing themselves away toward the next world that would pray for them and receive them and kneel to them and never be able to say, afterward, whether it had been saved or sentenced. They sang all the way to their ships. It was a lovely song. I have never been able to get it out of my head, and I have never been able to decide whether it is a hymn or a dirge, and I have concluded that on Palentine there was no longer any difference, and that there never had been, and that I had simply been too far from the singing all my life to hear that the two were one. I found Marshal Brune afterward in the ruins, and I asked him the question. I had nothing left to lose. Ren was ash, and my faith was ash, and my world was ash. I asked him, do you know what you are? Do you know that you are indistinguishable from the thing you fight? That your hatred is the blood god's own essence? That you scream his scream and raise his towers and feel his feeling, and that the only difference between you and the demon is the name you shout while you do it? And Marshal Brune, and this is the thing that ended me. This is the dreadful truth in a single answer. Marshal Brune looked at me, and he was not angry, and he was not surprised, and he said, yes. Just that at first. Yes. And then, seeing that I did not understand, he explained, in the calm, certain voice of a man who had made peace with a thing I was only beginning to see. And his explanation is the center of this sermon and the reason I will die. You think you have discovered our secret, Confessor. You have discovered nothing we do not know. Of course we are indistinguishable from the enemy. Of course our hatred is the same substance as his. What did you imagine could fight a god of war and hatred and slaughter? A god of gentleness. Gentleness does not win. Mercy does not win. Doubt does not win. Pity, remorse, and fear are luxuries of the safe. And we are not safe. Humanity is not safe. Humanity has never once been safe. And the only thing that has ever held back the horrors of the warp is a horror of our own, aimed the right way. We know what we are. We chose it. 10,000 years ago, we looked at the darkness, and we understood that it could not be fought by anything that was not willing to become like it. And we became like it, on purpose. And we pointed ourselves at the Emperor's enemies, and we have held the line for 100 centuries by being every terrible thing you just accused us of being. Yes, we are the blood god's essence. Yes, we feed him. And yes, we are also the only thing standing between him and the extinction of your species. and both of those are true, and we have made our peace with both, and you cannot. And that is the difference between a confessor and a Templar, and it is why you preach and we fight. You want a savior who is not a monster, Confessor. There is no such thing. There has never been such a thing. The galaxy does not permit it. There are only monsters, pointed in different directions, and the ones pointed at your enemies you call angels, and the ones pointed at you call demons, and the direction is the only difference, and the direction is everything, and it is not enough to make us clean, and we know it is not enough, and we do it anyway, because the alternative is that you and your acolyte, and your whole beautiful gentle world, go into the blood god's cup, all of it, forever. And at least this way, some of it survives to hate us for surviving. You are welcome, Confessor. You will never be able to thank us, and you are welcome. I asked him the only thing I had left to ask. I asked him, does the Emperor know what you are? Does he want this? Because that was the last thread of my faith. You understand the hope that the God I still loved would be horrified by what was done in his name. That the Emperor himself would weep for Ren, even if his angels would not. And Marshal Brune considered the question with a seriousness that frightened me more than anger would have. And he said, I do not know, Confessor. No one knows. The Emperor does not speak. He sits on his throne a galaxy away, and he has not spoken a clear word in 10,000 years. And everything anyone claims to know of his will is interpretation, is faith, is men like you and men like me deciding what a silent God wants, and then acting on it with weapons. Perhaps he is horrified by us. Perhaps we are his shame. Perhaps if he could speak, he would command us to lay down our swords and weep for your acolyte, and he would be right too. I do not know. And here is the thing you must understand, the thing that is the true center of us. It does not matter whether he wants it. The enemy is real whether he wants us to fight it or not. The demon does not pause because the Emperor might disapprove of our methods, so we do not wait for a word that will never come. We look at the horror in front of us, and we become whatever is required to end it. And we tell ourselves the Emperor wills it, because the alternative is to admit that we chose this ourselves, with no God to blame, and that we would choose it again, and that the horror we have made of ourselves was not commanded from on high but decided down here, by us, in the dark, as the price of your survival. I find the faith easier to carry than that truth, so I keep the faith. We all keep the faith. The faith is the story we tell so that we do not have to know that we became monsters of our own free will. You, of all people, Confessor, should understand the use of a comforting story. You sold them for 60 years. That was the moment he stopped being a monster to me and became something worse, a man. A man who had looked at the same abyss I was looking at, decades before me, and had not flinched, and had picked up the sword anyway, and had chosen to carry a lie because the truth was heavier, and who was, in that choice, more honest than I had ever been. I had come to Palentine's ruin to accuse the Templars of being unthinking monsters. I left understanding that they were the most thoughtful monsters in the galaxy, that they knew exactly what they were, had chosen it with open eyes, and kept the faith not because they were fools, but because faith was the only thing that made the chosen horror survivable to the ones enacting it. And that is worse. A monster that does not know is a tragedy. A monster that knows and chooses and is right to choose, that is the thing there is no word for. And I have been trying to find the word for the rest of my life. And the closest I have come is the title of this sermon. Chapter 5. The Dreadful Truth. And so I come to the end, and to my question, and I will ask it in a moment. But first I have to tell you the worst thing. The thing that makes this a confession, and not merely an accusation. The thing that is going to damn me more surely than anything I have said about the angels. Because if I only stood here and told you that the Black Templars are monsters, that would be heresy. But it would be a clean heresy, a comfortable one. The kind that lets you keep your own hands clean by pointing at someone else's. I cannot give you that comfort. I do not have clean hands, and neither do you. Let me tell you what the saved world looked like, because the word saved is doing a great deal of work, and you deserve to see under it. When the crusade withdrew, Palentine was quiet. Not the quiet of peace, the quiet of a thing that has finished screaming. Whole hive districts were ash. The great processionals were empty. The Basilica of St. Torvald was a crater with 3,000 souls in it. The Basilica of St. Aurelia, where I had preached for 60 years, was a shell open to the ash sky, its dome and its lying mosaic gone, its nave a swept scorch where the mound had burned. And the survivors, the billion who lived, did not celebrate. There was no thanksgiving. I tried to hold one. I am a confessor. Thanksgiving is my office. And I stood in the ruin of St. Aurelia and tried to lead the survivors in a hymn of gratitude to the angels who had saved us. And I could not do it, and neither could they, because we had all seen the same thing. And you cannot sing a hymn of gratitude to a thing you have learned to pull your children back from. The survivors of Palentine did not thank the Emperor for the angels. They thanked the Emperor that the angels had left. That is the prayer that went up from my saved world, in the ash, when the Crusade's ships finally lifted from the sky. Not thank you for sending them, but thank you that they are gone. A world thanking its God for the departure of its saviors. I have never heard a sound more damning, and I helped make the world that could produce it, and the children. I keep returning to the children because they are the clearest instrument, the ones without the adult habit of lying to themselves. In the weeks after, the children of Palentine did not play at being angels anymore. Before the crusade, every child on the planet had played the game. Every Imperial child plays being a space marine, smiting the enemy, descending from heaven in glory. After the crusade, that game was gone. It simply stopped across a whole world without anyone forbidding it, the way a thing stops when it has become unbearable. And a new game took its place, which the Ministorum assessors flagged as evidence of taint, and which was not taint, which was only truth. The children of Palentine began to play at hiding from the angels. One child would be the Templar, and the others would hide, and the one who was found was purged, and they played it in flat, quiet voices, the way children play a thing that is real, and the assessors screened them for corruption, and found none, because there was none. Because a child hiding from an angel is not corrupted. It is educated. It has learned the one lesson Palentine had to teach, and no amount of screening could purge a lesson that true. Palentine was saved. I have to say that plainly, because it is true, and because the truth is the whole horror. When the Black Templars withdrew when the Crusade moved on, as it always moves on, to the next war, leaving Palentine cleansed behind it, my world was still there. Perhaps 1 billion of us survived out of 4. The blood cult was gone, root and branch. The demons were banished. The taint was purged utterly, in a way that no gentler force could ever have achieved, because a gentler force would have hesitated, would have tried to save the exposed, would have left a seed of corruption somewhere in its mercy. And the seed would have grown, and in a year or a decade, Palentine would have fallen again, and this time all the way. The Black Templars did not leave a seed. Their wide margins, their burned basilicas, their purged processionals, their acceptable casualties, all of it added up to a certainty that no merciful method could have bought. Palentine was clean. 1 billion souls lived on a clean world who would otherwise have died, all 4 billion, in the blood god's cup. The Black Templars did exactly what I had prayed for my whole life. They saved us. They saved us the only way we could actually have been saved, which was horribly. And the horror was not a failure of the salvation, it was the price of it. And the price was real, and the salvation was real, and I cannot separate them, and neither can you, and neither could Marshal Brune, and that is the dreadful truth. Here is my question. I asked it at the beginning. I have earned it now. I ask it for the last time. When salvation looks like damnation, and sounds like damnation, and slaughters like damnation when the thing that saves you is, in every observable particular, in every act and every scream and every drop of spilled blood, identical to the thing it saves you from who is actually saving humanity. I have turned it over for the rest of my life, which is nearly over, and I have found only 3 answers, and none of them is bearable. And I will give you all 3, and let you choose your own damnation. The first answer is no one, that the Black Templars are not saviors at all, that they are simply a second horror, that Palentine was not saved but merely destroyed by a different hand, that 1 billion survivors on an ash world ruled by the memory of burning angels is not salvation, but only a slower, colder death, and that humanity is not being defended by monsters. It is being devoured by 2 sets of monsters who have agreed to call one set angels. That is the heretic's answer, the clean one, and I do not fully believe it, because 1 billion people are alive, and alive is not nothing, and Ren would have died either way, and at least this way some children who are not Ren grew up. So it is not quite true, but it is not quite false either, and that is the horror of the first answer. The second answer is Marshal Brune's answer. The monsters are saving humanity, and there is no other kind of savior available, and we should be grateful. That the galaxy is so terrible that only a greater terror can hold back the dark. That the Black Templars are humanity's salvation, precisely because they are horror incarnate. That their pity and remorse and fear were correctly amputated, because those things get you killed. That a defender who could still weep for a singing child would be a defender who lost, and a defender who loses damns everyone. And so the child must burn, and the defender must not weep. And this is not evil. It is arithmetic. It is the grim, necessary arithmetic of a galaxy at war. And to reject it is to choose extinction out of squeamishness. I believe this answer more than I want to. I have done the arithmetic myself, from this pulpit, for 60 years. Better 1,000 innocent die than 1 heretic live. I preached the Templars' creed my whole life. I only ever objected to it when I finally saw it enacted by someone strong enough to mean it. The second answer says the Templars are right, and I am a coward. And the terrible thing is that I cannot prove the second answer wrong, and I have tried. And Marshal Brune's face when he said "you are welcome" was the face of a man who had done the arithmetic more honestly than I ever had. I have to sit inside the second answer a little longer, because it is the one that will not let me go, the one I argue with in the dark, and because dismissing it too quickly would be a lie, and I am done with lies. Marshal Brune said the galaxy does not permit a savior who is not a monster, and I have spent my remaining years trying to prove him wrong, trying to find, anywhere in the Imperium's 10,000 years, a single defender who won without becoming the thing he fought, and I have not found one. The gentle orders are the dead orders. The merciful commanders are the ones whose worlds fell. Every force that has held, that has actually stood between humanity and the dark and not broken, has done it by amputating exactly the 3 things the Templars amputate: the pity that hesitates, the remorse that second guesses, the fear that flees because in a war against horrors, pity and remorse and fear are not virtues. They are casualties waiting to happen. They are the gaps the enemy pours through, and a defender who keeps them is a defender who loses, and a defender who loses damns everyone he was trying to save. The arithmetic is real. I have checked it from every angle a dying preacher can check anything, and it holds. In this galaxy, as it actually is, the only thing that reliably beats a monster is a monster. And so humanity has made monsters of its finest, deliberately, as a survival strategy. And it works. And that is why we are still here to be horrified by it. The second answer is not the cynic's answer. It is the engineer's answer. The cold, true answer of someone who has looked at what actually keeps the lights on. And it says, the devout monster is not a bug in the Imperium's defense. It is the load-bearing wall. Remove it and the roof comes down on everyone. I believe that. Throne, forgive me. I believe it. And believing it is worse than not believing it, because it means the horror is not a failure to be fixed, but a foundation to be maintained forever, with the bodies of singing children. And there is no reform, no better way, no gentle angel waiting to be built, if only we were wiser. There is only the monster and the choice to keep it or die, and we keep it, and we are right to, and it is unbearable. And the third answer is the one I actually believe, the one that will damn me, the one I have built this whole sermon to be able to say out loud once before I die. The third answer is that the question has no answer, because salvation and damnation were never two different things. That is the dreadful truth. Not that our saviors have become monsters, that there was never a version where they were anything else. Because the thing we call salvation, the purging of the enemy, the victory of our God over their God, the survival of our kind at the cost of theirs is structurally identical to what we call damnation, and always has been. And the only difference has ever been which side of it you are standing on. The blood cultists of Palentine believed they were saved when their god's demons came through, and the killing began. They screamed with joy, exactly as I screamed with joy when the Templars came. Salvation, to them, looked and sounded and slaughtered exactly like what I would call damnation. And my salvation looked and sounded and slaughtered exactly like what they would call damnation. And both of us were right. And both of us were the same. And the Black Templars and the demons were the same. And the Emperor and the Blood God are no. I will not finish that one. I am still enough of a confessor to not finish that one. But you heard where it was going, and I did not stop it in time, and that is the sentence they will execute me for, the one I did not quite say, the one you finished for me in your own head just now, and I felt you finish it, and now you are as damned as I am, and that is what a sermon is for. I have given you 3 answers, and I have told you I believe the third, and that is true, but I will confess one thing more before I ask the question the final time. I do not think the 3 answers are truly separate. I think they are one answer, seen from 3 distances, and the answer is that the question itself is the trap. Who is saving humanity? Assumes there is a clean savior to be named, a hero to be identified and thanked, a light to be told apart from the dark, and there is not. And the wanting there to be is the last piece of childhood the galaxy takes from you. There is no who. There is only a process, grinding 10,000 years deep, in which humanity survives by making its best into monsters and pointing them at worse monsters and calling the difference holiness. And the process has no hero in it and no villain in it, only monsters and directions, and the endless dead who are neither. And asking who is saving us is like asking who is the kindness in a fire that burns down the house next to yours, before it reaches you. No one. Nothing. It is a fire. It saved you by burning something else first. You may be grateful, and you should be, and there is no one to thank. And the fire does not love you, and it is coming eventually for your house too. And in the meantime, you kneel in the ash and watch it pass, and you cannot tell your gratitude from your terror because they are the same bent neck. That is the answer under the three answers. The question has no who because salvation in the 41st millennium is not a person. It is a weather. And you do not thank the weather. You only survive it and pray and kneel and lie to your children about what the black shapes in the sky are for. So, who is saving humanity? Monsters. Devout, faithful, glorious monsters who love the Emperor with all their hearts and burn singing children without breaking stride, who hold back the horror by being a greater horror, who are indistinguishable from the damnation they defeat and who defeat it anyway, and who are, may the Emperor forgive us all, the best we have not a corruption of humanity's defense, but its truest form, the thing faith becomes when it is finally strong enough to do everything it always said it would. The Black Templars are not the Imperium's failure. They are its fulfillment. They are what the whole Imperium is trying to become and is only prevented from becoming by its weakness. And I preached that becoming for 60 years and called it holiness. And it came to my world and burned my acolyte. And this is the last confession, the worst one, the one that proves the second answer and damns the first. I would call them again. If the blood cult rose tomorrow, if the demons came through, I would fall to my knees in this ruined basilica, and I would pray with my whole broken heart for the black drop pods to fall from the sky, because I have seen the alternative, and the alternative is worse. And I am grateful to the monsters, and being grateful to the monsters is the thing they have made of me, the thing the Imperium makes of everyone in the end. And there is one more thing I must confess before the door opens. The thing I have circled all sermon and not yet landed, because it is about me and not about them, and it is the reason this is a confession. I have become one of them, not in armor, not in war, but in the only way that matters, the way that is the substance and not the color. Because look at what I am doing, right now, in this pulpit. I have seen a truth. I believe it absolutely. And I am preaching it to you without pity. I have made you watch a child burn, made you hear the duet over the mound, given you no comfort and no gentle way out without remorse. I do not regret a word of it, though I know it damns you to hear it. And without fear the Arbites are at the door, and I am not stopping. I am past fear. I have paid it all away for the sake of the truth I serve. No pity, no remorse, no fear. I am preaching the Black Templars' own creed in this pulpit, in the act of condemning them, because I have found a God of my own, the truth, the terrible truth of Palentine, and I am serving it exactly as they serve theirs, with absolute devotion, with no mercy for myself or for you, willing to die for it and to make you suffer for it, certain, burning, complete. The thing that broke me made me into a smaller version of the thing that broke me. That is how it spreads. That is how it always spreads. You cannot fight the devout monster without becoming devout. And devotion is the substance the monster is made of. And so the truest opponent of the Black Templars is only ever another Black Templar wearing a different color. And I am wearing the color of the truth. And I am, in the only way that counts, one of them now. And I did not choose it. It was done to me by the sheer force of what I saw, the way their zeal is done to them, by the sheer force of the enemy they see. And none of us chose it, and all of us are guilty. And that is the contradiction closing its jaws on the last free part of me, as I stand here. So when I say we are grateful to the monsters, understand that I mean I have become a monster of gratitude, that my love of the truth is as pitiless as their love of the Emperor, that I would burn this whole congregation's comfort to ash, to make you see, and I am doing it, right now, and that being grateful to the monsters, and being made into one by the very act of understanding them, is the thing they have done to me, the thing the Imperium does to everyone, in the end, so that there is no one left standing outside it to judge it, only monsters of every color, pointed in every direction, and not one clean witness anywhere, not even a grieving old preacher who thought, for 3 days, that she was the exception. That is my sermon. That is the Imperium's greatest contradiction. Its saviors are its horrors, and its horrors are its saviors, and there is no third thing, no clean hand, no gentle angel, anywhere. And we are all of us kept alive by monsters we cannot tell from demons, and we call it faith, and we are grateful, and we should be, and it is the most terrible thing I know. One last thing, and then I am finished, and it is the answer to the question of why I am giving this sermon at all, knowing it will kill me, knowing it changes nothing, knowing the Templars will come to 1,000 more worlds, and burn 1,000 more wrens, whether I speak or not. Why break my silence? No, that is the other one. I am confusing myself. I have said too much. Why break my faith open in public? Why not simply carry it quietly to the grave? Why make you all complicit and myself a heretic for a truth that helps no one? Because of Wren. Because she went into the light singing. An acceptable casualty, a rounding error, and no one recorded her name. And the machine that burned her is designed specifically so that she will be forgotten, folded into the abstraction of the saved. Her individual death dissolved into the glorious total, and I am a confessor. And the one thing a confessor can do that the machine cannot undo is witness can hold up a single name against the abstraction and say this one was real. This one was a person and not scenery, and she died, and it was not holy, and I will not let it be dissolved. That is the whole of my heresy. When you strip away the theology, I am refusing to let one child become a rounding error. The Imperium can burn me for it, and it will not save Wren. Nothing will save Wren, but it will mean that once, on one world, someone stood in a pulpit and refused to call her death a sacrifice, refused to launder it into faith, refused to do the confessor's job of making the horror preachable, and named it, and named her, and was killed for the naming, which is the only honest funeral I have left to give her. So that is why, not to change anything, to witness, to be the one voice in 10,000 years that said the acceptable casualty had a name, and the name was Wren, and she was 12, and she sang, and an angel burned her, and it was not holy, whatever else it was. That is worth dying for. It is the only thing I have found that is. The Arbits are at the door. I am ready. I forgive you, all of you, for what you are about to let them do to me, because you are only doing what I taught you, purging the tainted voice, to keep the faith clean, and it is the right thing, and it is a mercy, and you should be glad. No pity, no remorse, no fear. Go in the Emperor's light, whatever that is. I no longer know, but go in it anyway. It is the only light there is, and the dark is worse, and that, in the end, is the only thing I am still certain of, and it is enough to build a life on, and it is not enough to sleep at night. And both of those are true, and that is Palentine, and that is the Imperium, and that is the end of my sermon. Amen. The Confessor Iona Vale was taken from the pulpit of the Basilica of St. Aurelia before she had finished, tried before the Ordo, and executed for heresy of the first degree. The specific charge was the drawing of false equivalence between the Emperor's servants and the enemy. Her sermon was ordered destroyed. Her congregation was screened for taint, and some were purged to be certain. Palentine remains a shrine world of the Imperium, cleansed and faithful, and its people pray, as she taught them, for the day the Emperor's angels will descend from the sky to save them, and they are right to pray for it. And the angels will come, and they will save them. And it will look exactly like the end of the world, because it is the same thing, and it always was. You have heard her question now, traveler. You will not be able to unhear it. The next time you see the shining armor descend in fire in a story, in a prayer, in the picked reels of a hero, watch the way it moves, and listen to the scream it makes over the slain. And ask yourself, as she asked, whether you are looking at your salvation or your damnation, and notice that you cannot tell, and understand that this is not a flaw in your sight. It is the clearest you have ever seen. This has been a transmission from the domain of the Voidborne Terrors. No pity, no remorse, no fear. Sleep if you can.